Welcome to WikiPodcast. Today we're diving deep into something, well, pretty fundamental to how we all navigate the world. Our self-image. And also that persistent inner voice, the critic in our heads.
Yeah, that critic. We're going to explore how this self-image, this picture we have, takes shape, and maybe how it can sometimes get a bit distorted.
Right.
And we'll really try to understand what this inner critic is all about. For you, the learner, our aim is to give you a clear understanding of this core part of our psychology.
Specifically, the psychology of thought, right? How we think about ourselves.
Exactly, how we construct that inner world. Okay, so let's unpack this. What exactly is this self-image we're talking about?
It's the mental picture you have of yourself, right? Almost like an internal snapshot you carry around.
Precisely. And what's kind of interesting is that this picture, it isn't always easy to change. It often has some real staying power.
Sticky.
Very. It includes the obvious things, sure, like your height or weight, things someone else could maybe see. But it also goes much deeper than that.
Deeper how? What else gets mixed in?
Well, it brings in everything you've come to believe about yourself, partly through your own life experiences.
Okay.
And this is crucial by absorbing the opinions and judgments of other people, throughout your life.
So it's a blend then. Facts plus feelings and outside opinions.
It's a real blend, yeah. Factual details meet very personal interpretations and things we've internalized from others.
Okay, so it's definitely more than just being aware that I exist. It's not just self-awareness.
Exactly. Self-awareness is more about simply being conscious of yourself. Self-image, though, it has this evaluative layer. It's the picture you hold.
Right.
And that picture can be positive, negative, or, somewhere in between.
And it's different from other self-words, too, like self-concept or self-esteem.
Yeah, they're all related but distinct. Think of self-concept as the broader idea of who you are. Self-image can be one piece of that puzzle. And it's not quite self-consciousness or self-perception theory or self-esteem or self-confidence either. Self-image is really this specific internal representation.
Got it. That specific picture.
Right. Now, psychologists sometimes use a more technical term for this, self-schema.
Self-schema. Okay, what's that about? Sounds a bit academic.
It does, but the idea is pretty straightforward. Think of it like any other mental framework or schema you use to organize information. Self-schemas just happen to be specifically about you. They store information about yourself.
And they affect how we think.
Absolutely. They influence how you process things, how you remember things, especially if it connects back to you. There's actually a thing called self-referential encoding. Basically, you're much more likely to remember information if you can somehow relate it to yourself.
Huh. Makes sense.
So these self-schemas, they become the traits we use to define ourselves, helping us build up a sort of coherent, consistent idea of who we are.
Okay, so we have this internal picture, this self-schema. How does a negative one start to form? Where does that come from?
Well, often a negative self-image can really take root in accumulated criticisms, particularly during childhood.
Right, when you're young.
Yeah. Kids are just so impressionable, aren't they? They tend to accept negative feedback, especially from parents or teachers, authority figures.
They take it as gospel.
Pretty much, yeah, before they really develop the critical thinking skills to step back and question those judgments.
That makes a lot of sense. If you hear something negative enough times growing up, it's almost bound to sink in.
Exactly. It gets internalized. And adolescence is another really vulnerable period, especially when it comes to body image issues.
Okay, definitely.
And there's more. Individuals who already kind of struggle with low self-worth might be more susceptible to developing social difficulties, social disorders even.
Okay.
But what's also quite interesting, maybe surprising, is that it's not just people who seem obviously insecure on the outside. Perfectionists, high achievers, even the sort of type A personalities, they can be really prone to negative self-images too.
Really? Why is that? You'd think they'd feel pretty good about themselves.
You would think. But they often set these incredibly high, sometimes just impossible standards for themselves.
Okay. Unrealistic expectations.
Totally. So when they inevitably fall short, even by a little bit, they can experience these intense feelings of failure.
And that feeds the negative view.
It reinforces it, yeah. The pressure they put on themselves is just immense.
And, we can't ignore the society angle either, can we? The constant bombardment of beauty standards and things like that.
Oh, absolutely not. Those societal ideals, like the huge emphasis on thinness in many Western cultures, for example, that can significantly contribute to a negative self-image.
Especially for younger people.
Especially for young girls and women, yeah, who might feel like they just don't measure up to these often really unrealistic airbrushed images.
So, okay, this negative self-image is there. Maybe it started in childhood. Maybe it's societal pressure. And then we have that inner critic starting up. How do those two relate?
Well, the inner critic, that voice in your head that's always pointing out flaws or shortcomings, it often reflects and reinforces the negative beliefs that are already part of your self-image.
So it echoes the bad stuff we already think.
It echoes it and it amplifies it. It makes it louder.
Yeah.
And it's really important to remember that inner voice. It isn't necessarily telling you the objective truth.
Right. It feels true, but it might not be.
Exactly. It's often just magnifying negative perceptions you already hold about yourself.
And it sounds like this whole dynamic, the self-image, the critic, it can even spill over and affect how we see other people.
Yes, that's a really fascinating aspect. When our own self-image feels a bit shaky or threatened,
Yeah.
we might, maybe unconsciously, engage in behaviors that seem to sort of prop it up, protect it.
Like what?
Well, some research suggests that when people get negative feedback that threatens their self-image, they might be more likely to evaluate members of stereotyped groups more negatively.
Wow. So if I'm feeling bad about myself, I might judge someone else more harshly to feel better.
Studies have certainly indicated that kind of tendency. One study found that people who got negative feedback on an intelligence test actually evaluated someone from a negatively stereotyped group more antagonistically afterwards.
That's kind of uncomfortable to think about.
It is. Another study showed that people with strong negative stereotypes literally put more physical distance between themselves and a member of that stereotyped group, especially when the stereotype was brought to mind.
So it affects behavior too, not just thoughts.
Yeah, it really highlights how our internal state, our self-image, can ripple outwards and influence our perceptions and interactions with the world around us.
That's quite revealing. Now, you mentioned a term earlier, residual self-image. What does that mean? It sounds like something from The Matrix.
Huh. It actually was popularized by The Matrix. Good catch. Residual self-image is basically the tendency to hold on to a certain perception of yourself, often your physical appearance, but maybe also social status or entitlement, even after your actual circumstances have totally changed.
Like a lingering echo of who you used to be or thought you were.
Exactly. A lingering echo is a great way to put it. And on a more serious note, there's also the concept of a self-image of victimization.
Okay. What's involved there?
This can unfortunately develop in individuals who've gone through prolonged abuse or manipulation. It gets characterized by feelings of helplessness, passivity, lots of negative thinking, and often a tendency towards self-blame.
It sounds like the experience of being victimized can become so ingrained it actually becomes part of how they see themselves.
Tragically, yes, it can become deeply embedded in their sense of self.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The idea of self-image disparity in children came up. What's that about?
Right, self-image disparity. That basically refers to the gap, the difference between how kids see themselves right now, their actual self, and their ideal self, the person they kind of wish they could be.
The gap between me and ideal me.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this gap seems to be linked to age and cognitive development. As children get older and their thinking becomes more complex,
They notice the difference more.
they seem to, yeah. They develop a greater capacity for self-reflection, for guilt even, and become more aware of the differences between how they see themselves and how they'd like to be.
Were there any interesting differences found between groups of kids?
There were, yeah. Some studies found, for instance, that boys tended to show a larger disparity, a bigger gap compared to girls.
Oh.
Any idea why? The studies didn't necessarily explain the why definitively, but it's an observed difference. Also, some research found Caucasian children sometimes showed larger disparities and also aimed for a higher ideal self compared to African American children.
Interesting. And socioeconomic status played a role too.
It seemed to, yes. Socioeconomic factors also appeared to influence these disparities. It really shows how many different threads feed into this developing self-image, even from a really young age.
It really does. So thinking about kids, what can be done to help them build a strong, healthy self-image?
Well, creating a really supportive environment is absolutely key. Things like open communication,
Talking to them.
talking and listening, offering reassurance, encouragement, supporting their hobbies and interests, letting them explore what they're good at.
Makes sense. Building confidence.
Exactly. And providing good role models is important too. It's noted that around age 5 or so, a child's understanding of themselves starts to get more nuanced, differentiating between their social self, their academic persona, their physical
So they
attributes.
start seeing themselves in different roles?
Kind of, yeah. And even way before that, infants go through stages of recognizing themselves in a mirror, that classic mirror test.
Oh, yeah. When do they usually figure that out?
Typically, they start showing real self-recognition, knowing it's them in the mirror, somewhere around 20 to 24 months old. Before that, they might react socially, like it's another baby.
Fascinating to think about how that sense of me just gradually emerges.
It really is.
Okay, one last area the sources touched on was how self-image can impact really personal parts of our lives, like sexuality.
Yes, that's an important connection. Particularly for women, research has found quite a significant link between body image, which is a huge part of self-image for many, and their sexual behavior and satisfaction. Women who tend to have a more positive body image often report, well, greater sexual activity, more comfort with intimacy, and maybe more willingness to explore sexually.
So feeling better about your body translates to feeling freer, maybe sexually.
It seems to correlate that way, yes. Higher satisfaction, more activity, more comfort.
And it's not just women who experience body image affecting this stuff, right?
No, absolutely not. Men can also experience significant body image concerns. For instance, dissatisfaction with perceived penis size is something that comes up, and it can really impact their comfort levels, their self-consciousness, and sometimes leads them to seek medical advice.
So it really underscores that these concerns about body image, about self-image, they aren't limited by gender at all.
Not at all. And they can have a very real impact on a person's overall well-being and how they engage with intimate parts of their lives.
So after exploring all this,
Yeah.
what does it really mean for you, the listener? I think understanding these complexities, where self-image comes from, where that inner critic might be getting its script, that's really the first step, isn't it?
It really is the first step towards maybe developing a more compassionate and also just a more realistic view of yourself.
Yeah, recognizing all those different influences, childhood stuff, societal pressures, maybe even those comparison traps.
Yeah.
It can help you spot where your own self-perception might be a little distorted, perhaps.
Definitely. And think about those different facets we mentioned earlier, like how you see yourself versus how you think others see you, or how you think you see yourself.
Right, those different layers.
Which of those perspectives do you suspect has the strongest hold on your own self-perception right now? It's something interesting to reflect on.
Thanks for listening. Write us your opinion on whether you believe your self-image is more influenced by your own internal thoughts and feelings, or by the external opinions and feedback you receive from others in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to help more listeners reach our episodes. Thank you, and have an amazing day.